Hey, welcome everybody to Plaid for Women TV. I'm Shivaun Palmer. Today we're talking about the need for pre-planning for a funeral or celebration of life service. My guest is Mr. Mark Kelly. He is with Lucas Funeral Home and Cremation Services based in Tarrant County, Texas. Mark, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You know, this is such an important topic, a topic that many times people want to avoid or not talk about because they're so squeamish about the concept of death, but so important. Tell us about the need for pre-planning for a funeral.
Absolutely, and I'm not sure if it's that it's so much squeamish as it's just out of the average person's daily train of thought.
Right.
I mean, who goes around thinking that when am I going to die? I'm going to die. Everybody's going to pass away. So the reason that pre-planning is so important, not for the enrichment of the funeral director, it's to protect the consumer, to protect the families that we see. This is not something that the funeral industry or the funeral home providers came up with. This is something that the federal government, through lengthy study in the Federal Trade Commission, got involved a few decades ago to try and protect the consumer, because we've all heard the popular story that's trotted out there of the unscrupulous or the dishonest funeral director that's preying upon someone's emotions when they come in and costing them a lot of money. I can assure you that while there are bad apples in the business, just like there are in any walk of life, nothing could be further from the truth. Our firm, which has passed down from generations, 6 generations in fact, was instilled with service, integrity, and honesty. How does that fit into pre-planning? Well, how it fits in, maybe you could share a little bit about, before I go on, about an untimely death in your family, just as an example for the viewer.
No, absolutely. No, I was sharing with Mark earlier, tragically we lost my youngest brother Kevin when he was only 29 years old. He was serving over in Saudi Arabia, had a massive heart attack, and it took almost 10 days to get him back stateside. So when you have a child that age, you're not really pre-planning. We didn't anticipate his death, so consequently our family was very emotional. We were grief-stricken, and I think we were taken advantage of in many ways in terms of what we were going to do for the funeral and so forth, because you're not thinking rationally. So again, going back to the value of pre-planning.
Well, there are several values. Primarily, if you pre-plan, you're not in a disadvantaged state of mind. You're not in a state of shock or in a state of grief, in that fog that you've experienced, that numbness when you've had an unexpected death. So when you come in to make a pre-plan and talk about your final arrangements, be it for yourself, be it for your grandparents or whoever, your mind is clear. You're thinking about what kind of music do we want? Who do we want to speak? What kind of stories do we want to tell about the deceased? You're clear, because you're really thinking about, or we try and guide people to think about, really a celebration of life. I know that's kind of a popular term that's been thrown around, but we honestly try to guide a family to look at the person that is deceased that we're serving. What were the unique things about them? What were the challenges that they overcame? What were the funny things? What were the quirky things? What were the things that they like to do the most? What lesson did you learn from them? I mean, we're honoring a life or celebrating a life.
It's beautiful.
That's what we're doing. So if you're in that state of mind, where you're not in a state of shock, you're going to make clear, rational decisions, not based on emotion, which, and I'm going to throw this in about us, is one reason that we do not have commissioned funeral directors making arrangements. We will never have that. We do not believe in quotas. We're not going to pray. In fact, we don't really over-present a lot of options to a family. They're there if they want to pick them, and spend more. Yeah, it's customized. Absolutely. So we don't want to see anybody come in, we're not living our life, which I think is popular out there. I think it's more of a myth, really. Our day-to-day serving of families, they're, oh boy, here comes someone in that's really upset, let's take them to the bank.
That's not what you're about.
It's just not, I don't see it. I've never seen it. I didn't see it with my grandfather, and I can assure you with my great-grandfather. So.
Well, let's talk about, seems to be more and more people are electing cremation these days vice a traditional funeral. Why do you think that is?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
People are electing cremation. The numbers are going up. Vice electing a traditional funeral. Why do you
Yeah,
think
that's
that is?
fascinating, really. I'd like to, in another fantasy, I'd like to be a sociology professor talking about the changes in culture. You know, during my grandfather's time, I think he performed one cremation, one or two in 50 years. Now we're at about 45% in this area. In fact, the stats are showing that 2015 may be the first year that cremation overtakes burial in the
Wow.
United States. I
Wow.
don't know if that's going to happen or not. I'm not sure if it's just cost, Siobhan. I think cost may be driving part of it because it's definitely you don't have to buy cemetery property if you cremate. You can. Some people do choose to bury an urn,
Sure.
or they choose to place an urn in a niche or a columbarium. So there is cost associated with that, but you don't have to. Whereas if you bury with a casket, then you have to. You're not going to keep it at home or place it in the backyard or on your mantle like you can an urn. So I think cost is part of the factor, but I also think part of the factor is cultural change in two ways. Are the transient nature where people are moving around and they're not living where their roots are.
I agree with that.
Combined with the statistics by the U.S. Census Bureau on church affiliation. I think that in the past, a lot of traditional churches and religions, a religion that I grew up in, did not believe in cremation. But 1/5 of our population now is not affiliated with a church.
Sure. So that's driving those stats too.
Well, I think it has to. You know, I found that statistic in 1980 on the U.S. Census, a little box that said, are you affiliated with the church? 10 million people checked no. In 2010, 60 million people checked no. So I can only believe that by the 2020 census, that's probably going to grow another 10 million or so. So I think a combination of change in religion, change in moving, combined with cost, are the factors that are why people are choosing cremation.
Right. You know, you've got some fantastic stats that people can go to on the Lucas website in terms of the specific services you offer to your clients and so forth. You know, in my case, we went with a larger, more corporate-owned funeral home those many years ago because we didn't know any better, and we consequently had some pretty negative experiences. Tell our viewers why the advantage of a family-owned funeral home vice one of these larger corporate entities.
Well, the thing that pops to mind is, honestly, we answer to our families. We don't answer to shareholders. So there's not a driving force or an external force influencing our company on the amount of profit or percentage of profit that has to be made. Now, we are a business. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a charity. We have to keep the doors open and pay our staff. But our real overriding concern is servicing the family. So I would say a family-owned firm like ours is a lot more flexible. If a family comes to us with various needs, we're going to be able to just call the shots. We don't have a corporate structure that confines us into that. And the ownership is here locally, not off distant in a boardroom somewhere. I mean, it's pretty simple.
That's critical. And it is a fantastic website, lucasfuneralhomes.com. You can get all information on the specific services, contact one of Mark's associates in terms of setting up some pre-planning documents and so forth. And again, from a personal standpoint, I wish my family had done that, because it would have taken a lot of the grief and a lot of the post death experience away. Mark, this is interesting. I'm sure you're asked this quite a bit just to wrap the interview. Many people ask why you get into this business, and what have you learned dealing with so many grieving families and loss? What have you learned personally about yourself and your own life and how you like to live your own life?
That's a good question, because I was born into this service, and we really consider it a service more than a business, in all honesty. And I left and have been away for 20 some odd years. So when I've come back in the last 3 years, I'm really sort of an outsider on the inside now. So I felt like I brought to here, more of a consumer's view. And the average consumer doesn't deal with a funeral home but maybe twice in their lifetime. So it's something that, folks are fairly ignorant of and not well versed of. And so for me, coming back here and getting the opportunity to serve families, not to sound cliche, but life is short and life can be extremely fleeting. So
Yeah, certainly can.
try and make the most of it. That's not as easy to do when you're caught up in your day-to-day worry and anxiety about bills, or worried about your children, or wondering, how come I'm not living my dream, et cetera, as you're taking the kids to soccer games, basketball games. But try and, I don't know, just try and reach out and I think maybe share as much love as you can. Honestly, for me, that's what resonates with me as I deal with people that are in grief and on a daily basis.
Right. Well, I can't think of a better way to end the piece with that. That's great information. Mark, again, for our viewers, we've got a fantastic website with all kinds of information, lucasfuneralhomes.com. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
You can contact Mr. Kelly here, Mark Kelly at lucasfuneralhomes.com. Come in and get some initial information on pre-planning needs. They're a great group of people there, and we're just honored that you were here to share this with us today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be involved with Plaid for Women.
Thank you.
I could go on and on about the strength of the women in my family. I can assure you.
Girl power.
Yeah, absolutely. And widow power. I will say we've had a lot of women in our family that were widows, that were left in pretty desperate circumstances, but in all seriousness rose to the occasion, and that's why this family funeral home survives. It wouldn't have without the strength of a couple of key women who were faced, with dire circumstances, no pun intended, back decades ago. This business could have gone under, it could have gone bankrupt, but they took the reins, and that's why we thrive and serve families, because of them.
Beautiful. Mark Kelly, thank you so much. Again,
Absolutely.
Pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Shivaun Palmer with Plaid for Women TV. See you next time.